Leah Adri-Soejoko loved her English garden and neighbourhood allotment too.
She really liked it there. She liked being able to grow her own food. She enjoyed meeting all the different people.
But seeds of conflict between neighbours took root in the urban paradise.
Within the power struggle within the allotments, Leah was the diplomat and trying to try and keep everybody happy as a family community.
Had rows over greenhouses, rose beds and grass borders culminated in the death of 80-year-old Leah Adri-Soejoko. On an early February evening, a sprightly woman from North London had been due to meet with a friend. She did not turn up. The friend calls to check on their meeting arrangements. No answer. Where was Leah Adri-Soejoko?
His calls to her went to voicemail. He called her about 3 or 4 times between 6 and 6:20, and each of the calls went to voicemail. And when she didn't turn up, he went back to the house at which her granddaughter lived. And so it became known to the family that she hadn't kept this appointment. The friend and the members of the family began looking for her. They retraced the steps that she would have taken to the tube station. Her daughter rang the local hospitals. They went to the allotment.
Because she should either be at home, at the allotment, or at this meeting. And the family searched locally. They go to Colindale police station in the early hours of the morning.
They eventually took themselves to the Colindale police station to report her missing at about 1:30 in the early hours of the following morning. By then, she'd been missing for about 6 to 7 hours.
Just before 2 a.m., dark and raining, the police and family secured access to the Colindale allotments, all the while trying to reach Leah by phone.
They get into the allotment, and imagine it's dark now, and there's no CCTV there, and they ring Leah's mobile phone. And you can only imagine how awful this would be. They hear it coming from inside a shed, which is called the mower shed. There's a padlock that they smash. They see Leah lying.
And that's how they found her.
As the family are traumatized and in shock, the investigating officers conclude this was a case of murder.
They see Leah lying, but she's covered with a coat, a blue coat. And we think that's so significant because whoever killed her, we believe must have known her, because psychology would suggest they either regret or they're trying to cover up the person that they killed.
The police very quickly established that the lock on the mower shed was one that required the use of the key to lock it. And so they knew from a very, very early stage that the killer had a key to that lock.
Who would want to kill an energetic, enthusiastic fan of growing her own vegetables and flowers? The scene was set for a neighbourhood detective story with a key as the key to whoever had killed Leah Adri-Soejoko. Police set about building a complete picture of the life of Leah Adri-Soejoko. Certainly everyone in the neighbourhood knew Leah, a woman whose life had started out in Belgium as Leah Husselmans.
She got quite ill when she was young, and I think she had pleurisy and spinal tuberculosis. And she spent some time in the south of France recovering. And as she told us that she basically spent about 1.5 years in a back cast, basically unable to move.
Leah would eventually move with her husband to the UK in the 60s. It was then they settled into the London suburb of Colindale.
There was the garden at home, which she used to do a lot of the work in. You know, Dad would mow the lawn, she would work on the flower bed. She liked cooking, so she liked to have vegetables and she liked to grow those. So there would be tomato plants around and stuff like that.
Over 20 years, Leah became secretary and treasurer of the allotments. It was her job to deal with plot holders, nudge them for their subs, and manage the site.
Within the allotment community, they all really respected her. If they had an issue, they would want to talk to Mum about it because they felt she would give them a fair hearing and do her best as far as she could to help out any issues that they've got.
As officers speak to locals, they hear about one of Adri-Soejoko's allotment neighbours, a man called Rahim Mohammadi, one of the many they'd have to talk to.
Here we have Leah's plot, which is quite large. That was her pride and joy. And then Mohammadi's plot over here. And within this area of brown and green, you've got the best part of 100 allotments.
McHugh and his team wanted to talk to Mr. Mohammadi because they'd heard he had been a close friend. He had a fascinating story. Rahim had arrived at the allotments via a unique project, one which offered solace and hope for an in-need group landing in England. In 2006, psychotherapist Jochen Enker began working with the charity Freedom from Torture, providing therapy for refugees at Colindale allotments.
He wouldn't talk, he wouldn't smile, he wouldn't look at you, he wouldn't relate to you. He would just be around. You could see he was listening in, but actually he was not participating at all.
His origins were in the Kurdish community in Iran. He was subjected to torture whilst in Iran, causing him to flee to the United Kingdom. He suffered as a consequence symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
And treatment for that PTSD included gardening at Colindale.
There was this big gate in front of the allotment. And the moment people opened that gate, I told them, try to forget, just be here. The group changed the atmosphere on the allotment. There's a microcosm of society, and some people didn't want us to be there. But generally, I would say there was much more love and care and appreciation than negative energy.
Leah, once a newcomer to England herself, was one of those who welcomed the refugees.
She took a lot of sympathy with Rahim Mohammadi, and she sort of took this very traumatised and very troubled man under her wing.
She did things to try and help him. She worked with him. I think he did the odd job around the garden at house, cutting things back.
She had helped us to get more plots, and like Rahim, he got his own plot and looked after it.
And he was passionate and also a bit of a busybody around the allotments and featured in Leah's life.
The busybody would soon want more control on the allotments, the right to rebuke those who did not care for their allotment, the chance to keep the weeds and the grass down, access to the allotment's lawnmower, which was locked away in a shed. Of course, in the days after the discovery of Leah's body, Rahim was not a suspect. He was her friend.
He presented himself as a lifelong friend, really dependable on Leah, and he was dealt with as a witness because he came across so convincingly.
As detectives dig into the relationships of those on the allotments, they are told that by 2016, Rahim Mohammadi had become known as a helpful, hands-on individual amongst the allotment community, good with machinery. 80-year-old Leah was glad to have him around. The couple were close.
I think he did the odd job around the garden at house, cutting things back.
I know that he had Leah quite a lot in her house, and because it wasn't next door, and so it was easy for Leah. I mean, she was elderly and she needed help. Also on her allotment, she couldn't do her allotment anymore.
She sort of welcomed into the allotments and sort of opened up these positions for him on the committee for the Colindale allotments.
It occupied nearly all of his time, and he was very heavily involved in the politics of the allotment, and he came to have strong views about how it should be managed.
I could see that something was changing in the atmosphere of the allotment, with power struggles and fights, and the tension between Leah and Rahim became stronger, and it was not anymore contained. Issues like, where are greenhouses allowed? At the end of the allotment plot or at the beginning? These were major disputes, and Rahim was really a sticker for saying, what are the rules?
There were discussions going on about the proposed eviction of a tenant of a plot that was being left undeveloped. And there came a moment when she told him to shut up. He was described as being extremely cross. At least one of them told the jury that he very clearly heard Mr. Mohammadi call her a f***ing.
Leia's family surrounded her for support. They suggested it best she simply leave him alone.
If at any moment Leia would have said, as the manager of the allotment, you need to go, Rahim, I can see him cracking up. Leia was not really aware what the allotment meant to Rahim.
Feelings were running high among the vegetable and flower beds, but Mohammadi told neighbours he felt his and Leia's relationship would soon be back to normal.
It was his case that very shortly after that they patched up their differences, they said sorry to each other, and it was all a storm in a teacup.
The morning of Tuesday, February 28, 2017, was cold. There had almost been a frost. This is what DCI Noel McHugh would hear about events that day from Rahim Mohammadi. Rahim had been a regular coffee caller on Leia. Now that things were cleared up, he wanted to resume the habit.
She'd invited him in and prepared him coffee and the like, and that they talked about this, that, and the other.
The following day, the cordons are in place, and so it's attracting a lot of attention. So a really quiet area of London has got police tape up, and people are really interested what's going on.
Mohammadi showed no interest in the police investigation taking place. That had piqued the interest of detectives.
Now, astonishingly, he doesn't try to get in. He doesn't speak to the officers and go in, try and get into the allotment, see what's happened. Bearing in mind, he's interested in every minute detail of what goes on in there. He doesn't knock on Leia's door to her house, nor does he phone her.
As news of Leia's death spread, Mohammadi calls an old friend.
He just heard the news that Leia had died, and he was incredibly upset on the phone and kept on saying, my mother died. And I said, look, your mother is dead. Why are you talking your mother is dying? And he was really confused.
But there was very good reason to doubt his account of an encounter between the two of them, of some warmth in which she'd invited him in and prepared him coffee and the like.
And Rahim's account starts to unravel, it starts to fall apart. And so from being a significant witness, he suddenly moves to being a suspect, and so we make the decision that he's to be arrested on suspicion of Leia's murder.
He was identified as a suspect on the Thursday, and he was arrested by the police near to his home on the Friday.
Central to Mohammadi's alibi was that he could not have killed Leia at the allotments that afternoon. He had been to and fro from the Edgware Road buying materials to work the allotment. Police indeed found CCTV of his journeys, but also evidence that he was lying about, of all things, making a cup of tea.
We have CCTV of him walking past Sheaves Hill Road. He claims that he's gone up to the local shops to buy a bottle of water to make a cup of tea, and he's then come back to his shed where he doesn't actually make a cup of tea. Just things like that seem really odd.
So there were no admissions of responsibility from him. There were no eyewitnesses to the killing. Nobody saw any sign of a disturbance. Nobody heard it. The case against him was wholly circumstantial, and it relied upon a combination of a very large number of individual, many of them quite small pieces of evidence, to put together a narrative pointing to him as being the person who was responsible.
As the inquiry unfolded, more evidence emerged. An autopsy established the use of a lawnmower cord as a weapon. Leia had been strangled.
The police dismantled the old lawnmower. They took the cord of it out, and found upon the cord was DNA that could be identified as coming from her and at the end of the cord that would have been in the inside of the machine, at the opposite end from the handle, so to speak, was DNA that could be identified as his.
Rahim's DNA was found on the rope that would recoil in, so when the officers cut the cord, the part attached to the lawnmower would then recoil back inside, and so was Leah's DNA found there.
The case against Rahim Mohammadi appeared strong. Police felt they had a picture of what had actually happened that day. They established the couple had been in another shed from the one Leah's body had been found, the so-called trading shed.
Leah has come back and she's been in there, and an argument has erupted, which has resulted in him striking her because she's got injuries that would suggest she was stunned, which caused her to go to the floor.
She was badly beaten up. She had sustained a number of recent blunt force impacts which had caused fractured ribs, serious bruising to her face.
He struck her, rendered her unconscious, or certainly stunned her, and then she has been moved from the trading shed to the mower shed, where he's then strangled her. So probably unconscious at the time she's been strangled, but unimaginable how you could do that to another human being.
The evidence was put to Mohammadi in an interview room. It was compelling, but still he refused to confess his guilt.
I think either he has convinced himself he didn't do it, or he's disassociated from it somehow. So it's not real. He actually, I think the only thing that came close to, from what I can understand, of him showing any kind of remorse is the fact that he covered her face. When her face was covered with an old coat when she was laid out.
Mohammadi went on trial for murder at the Old Bailey in February 2018. His former friend and psychotherapist, Jochen Enke, found his prosecution hard to take at first.
I saw things differently, and it was so easy to say it's a violent refugee, and of course it has to be accepted, and they painted a very negative picture, and I was very clear fighting that negative picture.
No murder trial is straightforward, and jurors could not reach a decision. The case was deemed a mistrial. A new jury would have to be sworn in. The judge ordered the retrial for November 2018. This time, the verdict was conclusive. Guilty.
I wouldn't say responsible, but I was thinking, what went wrong? What have I not seen? What could I have seen? This is a beautiful project, and at the end, Leah has been murdered and Rahim is in prison.
It's probably the most ridiculous thing in the world. It feels utterly unreal. If you read about it, or you saw it as something in a drama, you think, no, that's just stupid. And it is. It's such a stupid, wasteful. It's utterly senseless, and it is so ridiculous. Mum wouldn't hurt a person, hurt anything or anyone.